Welcome to Alpha Coding Podcast, an all-access pass to medical coding and billing pro tips that help you start your week off smarter. And now, here is your host, Toni Elhoms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Alpha Coding Podcast series. I am your host, Toni Elhoms. Welcome to episode 71 of the podcast. Today is May 10th, and I'm excited for today's topic. I get a lot of questions about how I get it all done. How do I balance so many different types of projects? How am I able to take an idea and execute that time and time again? So I'm going to give you guys some great pro tips on effective project management. So before we dive into our topic, it's time for your Monday dose of positivity, the Mindset Monday tip. And it's brought to you by Contempo Coding, which is an on-demand educational resource provider created for coders by coders. They specialize in affordable coding certification prep courses to help you accelerate in your career. Right now, they're offering an exclusive special to Alpha Coding Podcast listeners, and that's $125 off the Certified Risk Adjustment Coding Prep course, as well as some major bonus content when you order through our affiliate website. Visit our website, alphacodingexperts.com, and head over to the Deals and Discounts tab for a link to take advantage of this absolute steal of a deal. So our Mindset Monday tip is all about the power of never giving up. The quote I want to share with you says, "If you keep knocking, you'll find open doors." And I think this quote is so powerful because you have to understand you're going to get so many doors shut in your face. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to tell you no. I have been told no way more than I've been told yes over my career, but I didn't let those no's deter me from pushing forward. You have to keep knocking on those doors. Those doors are going to lead to networking opportunities, mentors, business relationships, jobs, promotions, maybe the inspiration to start your own business. You just never know. And if you're not willing to continue to knock on those doors, you're not going to get those opportunities. Doors of opportunities are open to those that continue to knock. So today we're going to cover my top 10 pro tips for effective project management. I've talked a lot about people management in previous episodes, but I want to spend some time focusing specifically on project management because it is a skill that has to constantly be developed to be able to take a project from idea to execution and exceed those expectations. At any given time, I could have 20, 30, 50 projects on my plate that have to be constantly monitored and managed. And without those strategies and tools in place, it can be very difficult to manage everything. So I'm going to share some great pro tips with you. So this brings me to my pro tip number 1. Start with a mind map. So mind mapping is such a cool tool. It basically helps your brain capture all of the things that you're thinking about that go on inside your head, and you could put it out there, collect it, and then kind of place it where it goes, because the mind can be a very crowded place. So what a mind map does is it creates a central focus, and then you have all of these associations, and you're able to categorize those associations. So anytime I take on a new project, I start with that mind map because it helps me declutter my mind and really develop that clear action plan. Mind maps are an incredible tool, and they definitely make you think better. Pro tip number 2, identify the project requirements. So this may sound super basic, but I can't emphasize it enough. Start with the scope of work or the scope of assignment. What are the expected deliverables? Because that's the starting point for understanding the goals and expectations of the project. You also want to identify what the budget is so that you can determine the appropriate resources. People, processes, and technology, PPT. It's something that I talk about all the time. You have to determine the appropriate PPT that's needed to take this project from idea to execution. So that original scope of work or scope of assignment needs to be the central focus of the project. That's where you're going to see the nuts and bolts as far as what the expectations and deliverables are and be able to develop that effective action plan. Pro tip number 3, develop a customized action plan for each project. So again, you're starting with that scope of work or scope of assignment. What is the budget? What are the goals at a very high level? And then when you're setting those goals, always make sure to set measurable goals, things that are quantitative and can be measured. And this is going to be really impactful for you as you go through more projects because you can learn from each project, because there's going to be key takeaways from each project that you take on, and they're going to serve as a powerful learning tool as you continue to build upon your project management skills. Another critical component of that action plan is going to be to identify what are the group tasks versus solo tasks. And this is going to look different for every project. Some projects are cross cross-departmental, meaning this can include legal, marketing, compliance, and then deconstruct each subtask. This is also where you want to define key milestones for the project and the timelines. So projects don't last forever. There needs to be a clear timeline from start to finish, and then set those milestones according to the timeline. And I promise you, the more clarity and more focused you get on establishing these things in the beginning, the more smooth and effective this process will be. And then, of course, you have to really think about what those deliverables are. Do they include presentations? Do they include reports, diagrams, visuals, all of the things that are going to be expected to be produced to a client as part of that project, or however it relates to what you're doing? So you want to get crystal clear on what those deliverables are, and don't make the deliverables the last step of your process. You need to be thinking about these deliverables, touching these deliverables, creating these deliverables well in advance of the project end date. Pro tip number 4, define expectations for each project. So here's where you want to get really clear. It's not just about developing that customized action plan, but now you need to set the expectations, the frequency of communication, delegating tasks, and making sure that your team understands what everyone's focus should be on and what everybody's expectations are. And the key with setting those clear expectations is having an end date, an end goal, so that everybody can think about and look towards that date, because projects don't last forever. Everybody needs to know who the project manager is. If that's you, great. You have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. If that's not you, this information is still relevant to you because you have a significant impact in the overall project. And then, of course, having those project milestones tied to hard deadlines is going to be key so that everybody understands what those expectations are for the project. And this may sound overly simplistic, but think about when you're managing, let's say, 10 different projects, because things can get out of hand very quickly. Pro tip number 5, collaboration is a critical element. So it's really important to keep the lines of communication flowing at all times. What I've experienced a lot of times is that communication is really strong in the beginning, and then it starts to fade off after a couple weeks into the project. It's really important that the project manager ensures that communication is flowing at all times. A lack of communication leads to a lack of collaboration, and this can definitely lead to missed deadlines, missed expectations, and impact the quality of your overall deliverables. So essentially, collaboration is communication, and that starts from the top. The project manager needs to be setting clear expectations that people need to be talking about this project on an ongoing basis and not waiting until the 11th hour to bring up all of these challenges and issues. Pro tip number 6, anticipate challenges and risks. And we've all heard of Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. So here's where you want to get clear about identifying what the dependencies are, what the potential restrictions are. So most often it's going to be related to budget, resources, time, or tech issues. So these are things that you need to anticipate well in advance, have some extra time, have some extra resources dedicated to these areas to ensure that you stay on target. Pro tip number 7, create a feedback loop. So the project manager needs to know what everyone is doing at all times, which means the communication has to be flowing, and everybody needs to have a clear understanding of how to report and respond to different challenges. And then, of course, everybody needs to have that visibility as to what the big picture is and what role they play in that big picture. So I'm a big proponent of information sharing. I don't like to see when people hoard ideas or information. So around here, we share everything as far as information, tools, resources, because everybody has different vantage points. And it's important that everybody has access to the same information because that inevitably contributes to the project. So how can you create that feedback loop? Obviously, there should be a kickoff meeting, regular check-ins with the team. There should also be a process of debriefing, which I will talk about a little bit later. You want to avoid working in silos. Pro tip number 8, leverage project management technology. So I talk about this all the time. You need to have the appropriate technology and resources. So I personally love the project management software Asana. I love Asana because it's super intuitive. I could do mind mapping, to-do lists, calendaring, so many different functions in one place. So you definitely need an effective PM tool. There's of course a ton of tools out there. It's all based on your personal preference. So figure out what works best for you. It's also super important that everybody has access to view documents in real time. So if you have 5 different people working on spreadsheets, Word documents, trying to make sure that you have the right version of each file is going to be a nightmare. So that's where you want to leverage tools like Dropbox, where everybody can do shared editing in one centralized place, and you have the ability to view in real time. Pro tip number 9, test your deliverables. It is so important that you give yourself the proper amount of time to be looking at your deliverables a lot more than one time. So for example, if I have a large audit project and that project is going to include 150 providers that are audited, the deliverables are going to include written reports like an executive summary, provider scorecards, provider audit sheets, all of the methodologies and assumptions that were used in that compliance audit. And then of course, there's going to be training and education with the providers and staff and some type of high-level presentation to the C-suite and executive leadership team. So in this specific example, there's going to be multiple project deliverables. And so it's really important that you give yourself a healthy period of time and you have lots of eyes look at these deliverables on multiple occasions. And if you're the one that's going to be presenting and delivering this information, you definitely need to have a lot more touch points on the deliverables. Pro tip number 10, reflect on what worked well and what can be done better for future projects. So as I said before, you want to use every project that you've done as a learning experience. And this process of debriefing helps you identify what worked and what didn't. So think about some of the challenges that you experienced. Did you have budget issues? Were the wrong assumptions made going into the project? Did you overestimate or underestimate the project? Did the team understand the plan? Were tasks properly deconstructed? Was the project appropriately scoped? What can be done better for the future? So a lot of times what I see is that we get to that project end date and then it becomes an afterthought. Nobody really takes the time to debrief and reflect on what worked and what didn't. And this debriefing process can be very impactful for you and your team as a learning experience for future projects moving forward. The last thing you want to do is take those mistakes and keep repeating them. So it's all about learning, growing, and evolving through the process. So grab a pen and paper to summarize my top 10 pro tips for effective project management. Number 1, start with the mind map. Number 2, identify the project requirements. Number 3, develop a customized action plan for each project. Number 4, define expectations for each project. Number 5, collaboration is a critical element. Number 6, anticipate challenges and risks. Number 7, create a feedback loop. Number 8, leverage project management technology. Number 9, test your deliverables. Number 10, reflect on what worked well and what can be better for future projects. So it's time for this week's coding pro tip, and it's brought to you by Project Resume. When is the last time you had your resume updated? Your resume is literally your entry ticket to that next great opportunity. Project Resume will design a customized ATS-friendly resume to demonstrate your unique skills and experience. And even better, it's written by coders for coders. Make that investment in yourself today and visit projectresume.net and mention my code ALPHACODING for special pricing. If you have a coding related question and would like to be featured in one of our coding pro tips, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. So this week's coding pro tip comes to us from Illinois. Hi, Toni. I love the show and appreciate your content. I have a question for you on chronic care management. Can our providers report CCM in the same calendar month as, let's say, TCM? If not, which service should we report? Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for your support of the podcast. So I've definitely talked about CCM and RPM and I think TCM in previous episodes, but just be aware that the same provider cannot report TCM and CCM within the same calendar month. The biggest reason is that some of these activities overlap, and so you always want to make sure that you're reporting the services that are most reflective of what was rendered to the patient. So if the patient meets the criteria for transitional care management and that initial communication took place for the requirements for TCM and you have TCM documentation, then TCM should be reported. But if the provider was truly rendering CCM, then they should report CCM. So I hope that points you in the right direction. Please remember to hit that subscribe button now so you never miss another episode. Also, be sure to drop us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. We really appreciate your support. So this concludes today's episode. Until next week, thank you for listening to the Alpha Coding Podcast. We'll see you next Monday. Monday.
For more information about medical coding and billing pro tips, including how to hire alpha coding experts, follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or visit our website at www.alphacodingexperts.com.